Titanic, yay! I'm so excited. I get to see how inaccurate this is. Yes. Alright, so we're gonna choose the best video that we see here. Here. I think we're gonna go. I looked at this one. This is not look good. Right, let's watch this. I'm not excited.
December 19th, 796 CE.
Why are we here? This is not doing with Titanic. We're in the middle of the forest in 796. What is going on right now?
People around the world look at the night sky in dismay, eyes wide with anxiety. The moon up above is blood red and huge, as big as they've ever seen in their...
What? The moon gets red sometimes. It's just a natural occurrence, okay? There's no need to talk about anything. No. Everything's really all good. Everybody calm down. Like everything is all good. The moon gets red sometimes.
Lives, and we'll never see again. For this was the closest the moon had ever come to Earth, until 1,100 years later.
1,000 years later? 1,000 years later would be 2,007, like 1,700.
On January 4th, 1912, people of...
That is not 1,000 years later. It was 1796. That was like 1,200 years later.
Earth witnessed a very similar event.
No, the moon was completely dark that night on the Titanic, which means it wouldn't have been seen anywhere else. The moon wasn't even there. It was in its new moon cycle.
An enormous red moon in the night sky.
No, I already disproved that.
At the time, it was already known the supermoon was just a natural phenomenon, but still, it might have turned out a bad omen for the Titanic, which set sail.
Okay, so first of all, as I already said, it was midnight when the Titanic hit the iceberg, and there was no moon that night. This supermoon thing is really catching on to me.
3 months later, never to reach its destination. The moon heavily affects tides on Earth. Without our natural satellite, there would be no tidal motions on the planet, and most likely,
yeah, I guess,
life wouldn't have appeared at all. The closer the moon is to Earth, the stronger the tides are because of the increasing gravity of the satellite. Back in
Well, that has nothing to do with sinking ships. Realistically, if water goes up, then a ship is just gonna float up with it.
1912, the moon was so close it caused a heavy commotion in many parts of the world, and even made several glaciers in Greenland break apart.
First of all, there was no commotion that I've heard in 1912. And second of all, Greenland ice break off all the time. What are you talking about?
Massive chunks of ice that broke off from the glaciers started floating south, carried by the ocean.
Well, the ice came out before 3 months ago, and the Titanic was just in a natural ice field.
Currents. They were slow and menacing, threatening lots of ship routes along their way.
Alright, so that makes no sense. Why would they be drifting towards France or Spain? Titanic sank towards the Americas. They were nowhere near Europe.
But the worst thing was that they weren't alone. The supermoon event came just 6 minutes after a spring tide, the alignment of the moon, the sun, and Earth that makes their combined gravity reach its peak twice a month.
Okay.
And the day before, our planet had come the closest to the sun that year, which made the gravity even stronger. This mixture of
I don't think gravity just gets stronger like that. People live for many years and gravity does not get stronger.
events created perfect conditions for one of the...
Also, where's Venus and Mercury? I think they just vanished from the universe.
...most powerful tides in history. Icebergs breaking off from Greenland's glaciers tend to drift off to the coastal waters of Labrador and Newfoundland, where they often run aground. To move on, they need to either melt and become lighter or catch a high tide that would carry them further.
I don't get what you're talking about. There was no supermoon thing or anything like this that was going on in Titanic.
1912's tide was as high as it gets. Many shipping routes were shifted southwards because of an abnormal amount of icebergs that moved from the north within the following months.
Well, this was the only thing that was probably actually true. Oh, and is that the Titanic route? The captain literally moved south.
Not the Titanic, which was...
You've got to be kidding me. That is not true. The Titanic was going perfectly south. In fact, the captain even went south to avoid the ice.
Dubbed unsinkable, the great steamer plowed the Atlantic quickly and surely until it met its gruesome fate on April 14th. The abundance of ice in the North Atlantic, though, wasn't such a rare occasion, so it couldn't be the only reason for the crash.
Yes. Icebergs. Yes, icebergs were the reason the Titanic sank.
Researchers have proven that the Titanic had received several warnings of solitary icebergs and even ice fields from other ships.
Yes, we know that Titanic received a bunch more ice warnings and a bunch of stuff, and they were sent to the captain. And he did keep out. He got special lookouts, look for small ice and growlers. And I think if he kept the original lookouts, the Titanic disaster wouldn't have happened.
For example, at 9:40 p.m., the Mesaba, a liner passing by not far away, signaled the Titanic about an ice field on its way. Although it was mandatory, the message was never relayed to the bridge.
Also, does this look like a Arctic environment? Because the wireless operator room looks completely different and it's up in the bridge area.
The wireless radio operators on board the ship were busy with passenger messages. Same thing happened.
Yes, because the telegraph malfunctioned and they had to fix it through the night, which is the reason they didn't kind of accept the Californian's message.
Happened when the Californian, roughly 20 nautical miles away at the time, sent another ice field warning. The Titanic's radio operator even scolded the Californian for interrupting him.
That's because he was talking to Cape Race over 300 miles away, so he had to turn up the volume on his telegraph to hear him. And since California was only 20 miles away from him, it was a loud, irritating sound, and he hadn't gotten any sleep the night before.
In the meantime, it was dark outside, and the ocean was unusually calm. The almost flat surface of the water made it harder for the Titanic's lookouts to see icebergs up ahead. When waves crash against an iceberg, their crests are clearly seen against the darker surrounding waters. But when the sea is calm, there's nothing to crash. What made the situation even worse, the binoculars were locked in a safe.
The binoculars were left in a safe by a crew member left, and they would not have helped. You would just seen more black.
And the key had been left on shore by accident. So when the lookouts finally noticed the fateful ice rock, it was already too late. One more
screams. It was like midnight.
Obscure detail was that the iceberg might have actually been what's called a blackberg. If you have had to draw an iceberg, I bet it would be a white, towering chunk of ice covered with snow.
Probably. Probably that's what most people would draw.
But those who have visited Antarctica know that icebergs come in millions of hues. They can be
What the heck is that? Is that a trash net?
colored, patterned, striped, or black. The ice a berg is made of might be extremely pure, with no air bubbles or cracks. In this case, there's nothing to scatter the light. The iceberg will absorb it all and look black. Or an erupting volcano can cover a glacier with volcanic ash. Then the iceberg that breaks off this glacier will be dark colored too. Smooth.
I don't think the iceberg was necessarily dark colored. It was dark white.
And pure blackbergs form when an iceberg rolls over after its top has melted, changing the weight distribution. The water underneath smooths down the ice, and there's no air there to form frost on it. So the new top absorbs the light and looks dark. Researchers are...
Okay, and there's Titanic. It's gonna hit the iceberg.
Pretty sure that the actions of the crew that followed were blundering too. First of all, the Titanic's first officer ordered a so-called porting maneuver at the site of the iceberg, but also told the crew to reverse the engines. The maneuver was to turn the ship first right and then sharp left to swing the hull about and avoid the worst. If the crew hadn't done that, the iceberg could have torn through the whole starboard or right side of the Titanic.
Alright, so first of all, it didn't work exactly like they showed. It did hit the iceberg, and then they turned towards so that it didn't hit the Titanic's propellers. So they didn't avoid it completely,
making it capsize and sink in a matter of minutes. But the reverse engine's order was likely a mistake. Many experts agree that a head-on collision with the iceberg at full speed would have lessened the damage to the ship, because the Titanic's bow was much sturdier than its sides. And even if it had been torn through, fewer watertight compartments would have been damaged and flooded, and the ship would have stayed afloat. The speed should have dropped much earlier, when first warnings of ice fields had been received. At half the speed,
So the captain of the Titanic said if there was any haze, they would have ordered to stop the ship. Yep. And yeah, that's because they hadn't seen any. So yeah.
Titanic's lookouts could have noticed the iceberg from a bigger distance and warned the officers much earlier. And that would have allowed to maneuver away from danger way in
Just that Titanic really have legs and it's flying.
advance. You could say the Titanic should have just used brakes and stopped entirely instead of maneuvering.
That isn't exactly possible, which is what they're gonna say. Okay? Because, first of all, if that happens, you're probably gonna hit the iceberg again trying to get around it. That's a huge risk. Second of all, the boat doesn't stop immediately like a car. It takes like a few minutes for it to stop. And reverse is practically the same thing as stop. It goes into stop and then it goes in reverse.
But the thing is, ships don't have brakes. In a car,
Yes, that's what I was saying. They have a stop thing, which is basically a brake.
brake pads tightly grip wheels' rotors and cause a lot of friction, basically restricting them from moving at all. And if wheels stop, they cause friction with the road. And more friction means less speed until the car eventually stops.
Yeah, but this has nothing to do with the Titanic.
It doesn't work like this with water, though. Ships usually move either with the help of a jet stream of water shot from a nozzle or by utilizing propellers. If you just stop the stream or propeller, it won't be enough to halt the ship. The power of
The ship will, unless the water is really calm, like the Titanic was, you could stop the ship if you went on stop, up, and yeah.
inertia will take it far ahead before it finally stops. That's
what I was saying.
why reversing the engines is the best strategy there is. The stream or propeller will work in the opposite direction, bringing the vessel to a halt. If
Yes.
not stopped, then of course, it will continue pushing it backwards. Another problem, though, is that ships, especially such large ones as the Titanic, are a lot heavier than any car or even a truck.
Yeah, that's true. It was like 50,000 times.
The more massive an object is, the harder it is to make it stop. So even if the Titanic had been a land vehicle equipped with wheels, halt.
Who thinks of these ideas? Yes, what the heck? Why do you even have a vehicle that big?
Halting it completely would have taken minutes. That's also why, for example, trains can't stop entirely in seconds. They're too heavy, and the inertia of the cars behind the locomotive would throw them off the tracks,
And that's how a lot of train crashes are actually caused.
resulting in a disaster. When the Titanic sent out a distress signal, several ships
Was it sinking by the stern? Anybody explain that? I don't know.
received it and replied, but they were all too far away. The
Oh, the closest that actually responded was the Carpathia. Yeah, but the California didn't. What? The ship sinking by the stern once again.
closest one turned out to be the Carpathia, but it took 3 hours to reach the sinking steamship and
Okay.
rescue the surviving passengers on lifeboats. But another ship had been much closer to the crash site and could have been there in an hour. And yet it didn't arrive at all. It was the Californian.
Yep, let me just quickly explain the story. So basically the Californian, you know, still with that wireless message, the telegraph broke, and the wireless operator was chatting with Cape Race, a land station 300 miles away. California was only 20 miles away, so it was loud. So then the Californian, kind of just thought and then the Californian radio operator went to bed, so they didn't receive the message.
The same liner that had earlier warned the Titanic of an ice field. The Californian's wireless radio had been turned off for the night, so the crew
That's what I was saying.
couldn't hear the distress call. But soon, the Titanic started shooting up signal rockets.
They thought they were just like partying or something. I don't know.
There was no chance the Californian 20 miles away didn't see them. Later at the court,
No, they did see it.
the crew would testify that they did see the rockets, but they also saw a vessel about half the distance to the Titanic and thought it was the ship sending distress signals. They tried to contact it using a signal lamp, but the ship didn't reply. When the
I think it must have been like the iceberg or something.
rockets went up, the crew of the Californian woke up the captain, but he ordered to continue sending light signals instead of turning on the radio. In the
Yep, I think that's what he did.
end, this decision might have been fateful for the Titanic. Records show no other ships that close to the Titanic that night, but the Californian's crew were unanimous in that they'd seen some vessel. What's more,
It was the iceberg. My theory that it was just the iceberg.
some passengers of the Titanic also claimed to have seen a ship heading towards them, though it never reached the sinking steamer. Some were even willing to believe it was a ghost ship, but the truth
Oh no, what is it?
was likely much simpler. It must have been a poaching boat. Then, it would have made sense for it to keep a low profile. And of course, no records would have existed about it. Another
Why would they fish out in the Atlantic? I don't think that's a good idea.
possible cause of the crash was a mirage strip, a phenomenon known since the times of the Vikings. But that only came to the public attention in early 2021. Mirage strips appear on clear and calm waters when cold air just above the surface is overlaid by warmer.
Alright, sorry guys, but this video is gonna